My name is David, and I am 45 years old. I have 2 children from my first marriage, Lily, who is 11, and Ben, who is 9. We live in Austin, Texas, in a modest but warm house that I chose not because it was grand or fashionable, but because it had room for my children to breathe, to play, to feel safe. Their mother and I divorced years ago, and though the process tore me open, we managed to settle into a rhythm of co-parenting that is not poisoned by open hostility. We are not friends, but we are not enemies either. The children move between our homes with a steady kind of balance, and for that I am grateful. 3 years ago, I married Amber. She was radiant in the way only people who have learned to survive can be. With her came Hannah, her daughter, who was 13 then and is 16 now. At first, I looked at Hannah as I might at a wounded bird, fragile, wary, expecting abandonment at every turn. Her father, Paul, had been a constant shadow, but never a presence. He was the man of expensive gestures and empty pockets. He made sure his social media glowed with carefully lit photos of himself beside Hannah on birthdays, holidays, and vacations. The captions always said things like, #BlessDad, or nothing matters more than family. But those posts were smoke. Behind the screen, behind the curated image, was absence. Paul never paid the doctor when Hannah needed braces. He never sat through a parent-teacher conference, never kept track of her math scores or her forgotten homework. He wasn't there when she was sick, when her phone shattered, when her shoes wore thin. He wasn't the one who got the late-night calls from the school nurse asking if someone could pick her up because she had a fever. No, that was me. I bought Hannah clothes when she outgrew them, and sometimes when she wanted something she didn't even need, I gave in just to watch her smile. I paid for her school trips, for her gym membership, for the endless insurance that seemed to multiply as she got older. I upgraded her phone when she begged for a new one, paid for the cracked screen when she dropped it, and quietly slipped cash into her account so she would never have to say no when her friends asked her to join them. Every season of her teenage life had my fingerprints on it. And here is the truth. I never kept a ledger. I never thought of it as a debt to be repaid or as ammunition for a future argument. I never saw it as leverage against her or against Amber. To me, it was simply what needed to be done. I told myself that this is what family means, not blood, not DNA, but showing up. Being there in the everyday grind, the unglamorous reality that never makes it into Instagram posts. I wanted Hannah to believe that not every man in her life would vanish. I wanted her to know stability, to understand that when I said, "I've got this," I meant it, that she was as much a part of this family as Lily and Ben, no more and no less. I gave her everything because I believed love could be built, brick by brick, with consistency. And I did it in silence, without fanfare, because love does not announce itself with fireworks. It proves itself with receipts, with signatures on checks, with hours spent working to provide what others take for granted. Still, there were cracks. They were small, almost invisible at first. A glance here, a word there. The way she sometimes introduced me to friends simply as my mom's husband, instead of my stepdad. The way she rolled her eyes when I reminded her to finish homework, or the way she flinched when I suggested she join us. Me, Lily, and Ben, for a family game night. Amber would tell me not to take it personally. "She's a teenager," she said. "That's just how they are. She'll come around." And I believed her because I wanted to. I wanted to think that the walls Hannah kept around her heart were just the defenses of a child who had been disappointed too many times by her father, and that in time, my presence would break through. So I ignored the cracks. I told myself that the silence was temporary, that her occasional coldness wasn't rejection, just immaturity. After all, I was building a foundation. That's what I kept repeating in my head. Every dollar spent, every bill paid, every hour of overtime worked. I am laying a foundation for her to stand on. But foundations built on silence are fragile. Sometimes, when I was up late at night, I would walk through the house while everyone slept. I'd see the evidence of what I had provided. The neatly folded clothes I'd bought her on the dresser, the glow of her phone charging on the nightstand, the textbooks stacked on her desk. Each item was a reminder of me, though unacknowledged. She never thanked me, not once, but I didn't demand thanks. I told myself that fathers, real fathers, don't give for gratitude. They give because it is their duty. They give because children should never feel the weight of the cost it takes to raise them. I thought that if I could give without asking, one day she might wake up and see me not as her mother's husband, not as some intruder in her life, but as the man who never left. And yet, even as I repeated these justifications, I could feel something shifting inside me. A dull ache that grew sharper each time I watched her post photos with her father, tagging him with captions like, "Best dad ever." I would look at those posts and feel my jaw tighten. He was the ghost with the spotlight. I was the laborer in the dark. Still, I endured. I paid the bills, I carried the load, I held my tongue. For years, I told myself that love, like respect, cannot be demanded. It must be earned. I believed, with a kind of stubborn hope, that one day Hannah would see the truth. That one day, she would look past the glitter of Paul's empty gestures and see the man who had been there, quietly all along. That was my role, my choice, my sacrifice. And for years I believed it was enough. One night, everything cracked. It wasn't a fight, not at first. It wasn't screaming or slamming doors. It was a single sentence, muttered under Hannah's breath like a casual insult, but sharp enough to cleave bone. We were all at the dinner table. Lily and Ben were laughing about something from school. Amber was serving the last of the roast chicken, humming softly to herself. Hannah sat across from me, her eyes half glued to her phone, pretending to eat. It was an ordinary night, one of those quiet domestic evenings that should have meant safety. Then she said it. "Don't use your last name for me," Hannah muttered, her fork scraping against the plate. "You're not my dad." It was soft, almost dismissive. She didn't shout, didn't make a scene. But the words carried like G** fire in a church. The whole room went silent. Even Lily and Ben froze, their mouths half open, their hands pausing in midair. Amber looked from Hannah to me, her eyes wide with shock, but she said nothing. And in that silence, the weight of her sentence pressed down harder than if she had screamed it into my face. "You're not my dad." That was it. The blade cutting through years of sacrifice. The truth I had feared, spoken aloud with casual cruelty. I felt the air leave my lungs. My chest tightened, not with anger but with something colder, heavier. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was clarity. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't say, "After everything I've done for you?" Or, "That's not fair." I didn't defend myself because I knew the futility of begging for acknowledgement. She had spoken her truth, and the truth was a wall I could not climb. Amber finally broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "Hannah, that's not necessary." But her voice was weak, her words little more than an empty gesture. The damage was done. The rest of the meal was silence. Lily poked at her food without eating. Ben stared at his plate, not understanding but sensing the fracture. Amber forced a smile, tried to start a new conversation, but the words fell flat. The dinner table, once a place of family, had turned into a battlefield with invisible lines drawn across it. That night, when the children were in their rooms, Amber tried to excuse it. "She didn't mean it like that," she said softly, her voice trembling. She's angry, she's confused. You know how teenagers are." But I had heard the truth, and I could no longer pretend. The next morning I woke before dawn. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the bills that seemed to multiply each month. Phone $80. Insurance $160. Sports and activities $200. School fees $60. Extras $120. Altogether, more than $600 every single month poured from my pocket into Hannah's life. And that didn't count the one-offs. The trips, the clothes, the phones, the endless little things that always added up to thousands a year. 6 years of this. 6 years of carrying her life as if it were my sworn duty. 6 years of being invisible in every way that mattered, except on paper, except on the receipts. I took out my laptop. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't angry, I was focused. Cold. Clear. The gifts I had planned for her birthday? Cancelled. The allowance I sent every 2 weeks? Stopped. Her spot on the family insurance plan? Removed. The credit card tied to Amber's debts, the one she racked up trying to cover Hannah's extras? Severed. I stripped it all away, line by line like a surgeon cutting out rot. Then I went further. I drafted an email to Paul. It was short, clinical, without apology. Hannah has made it clear she does not want me to be considered her father. From now on, her expenses will be directed to you. Phone, $80 per month. Insurance, $160. Activities and trips, $200. School fees, $60. Extras, $120. Altogether, more than $600 monthly. She wants her biological father to handle these responsibilities. That is you. Expect the bills directly. I attached the necessary documents. Phone contracts, insurance forms, school invoices. I hit send. And with that, the torch was passed. By the afternoon, the fallout began. Hannah's phone was cut off when the bill went unpaid. Her coach wouldn't let her step onto the field without fees. Her school account slipped into the red. Every corner of her life where I had been the silent foundation began to crumble. Paul called me furious. His voice shook with anger, but beneath it was panic. "I can't cover all this," he shouted. I pressed the phone to my ear, my voice calm, steady. "Welcome to my last 6 years." He sputtered, tried to argue, but I didn't let him. "You wanted the title of dad. You have the blood. You have the name. Now you have the bills." And I hung up. Amber confronted me that night, her voice sharp, tears brimming in her eyes. "David, how could you do this? You're punishing Hannah for being a teenager." I looked at her, my voice low and cold. "No, I'm punishing myself if I keep playing father to a child who openly rejects me. I won't buy my way into a role she refuses to grant me. If I'm not her dad, then I won't act like one when the bills come due." She stared at me, speechless, as if seeing me for the first time. But I didn't waver. For years, I had carried Hannah as though love could be built with money, as though respect could be earned with receipts. But in one sentence, she made it clear. I was not her father. Very well. Then I would stop pretending. And I did. When I sent those bills to Paul, I thought he might ignore them. I thought he would laugh, toss them in the trash, and disappear into whatever life he'd built on lies and absence. But I underestimated the weight of money when it comes with no buffer. For years, I had been his shield. Now, without me, every cost landed in his lap like a hammer. The first was the phone. $80 a month. Nothing to me, but apparently too much for him. 2 weeks after I canceled the payment, Hannah came storming into the kitchen, her face pale with outrage. "My phone's shut off," she shouted, slamming the useless device onto the counter. "What did you do?" I didn't even look up from the paper I was reading. "I didn't do anything. I stopped paying. Talk to your father." Her mouth opened, then closed again. I could see the gears turning, the dawning realization that for the first time in her life, her comforts depended not on me, but on the man whose name she insisted on carrying. The second was insurance. A letter arrived, stamped urgent, coverage terminated. Without it, every doctor's visit, every prescription, every emergency would bleed straight into Paul's wallet. When Amber saw the notice, her hands trembled. "David, this isn't right," she whispered. "What if something happens to her?" I folded the letter neatly and slid it across the table. "Then her father can step up. Isn't that what Hannah wanted?" Amber's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't answer. The third strike came with her soccer team. The coach called, his voice apologetic. "We can't let her play until fees are covered." The $200 I once paid without thinking was now a wall. Hannah begged Amber, begged Paul, begged anyone who would listen. But the coach stood firm. No payment, no field time. She sat on the bench while her teammates played, her arms crossed, her face burning with humiliation. School followed. Lunch accounts unpaid. Field trip fees denied. Notices sent home in envelopes marked balance due. Each one landed on Paul's doorstep because I had forwarded them all. Neatly organized, No explanations needed. Your daughter prefers you handle her expenses. I wrote at the bottom of every envelope. I am respecting her wishes. And still, the storm gathered. Paul finally called me. His voice wasn't the booming confidence he showed online. Not the polished tone of a man who staged fatherhood in photographs. It was shaky, raw, panicked. "David, I can't do this," he said, his voice cracking. "I don't have the money for all this stuff." I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm, measured. "Then welcome to my life. 6 years, Paul. 6 years I carried what you abandoned. You showed up with gifts and pictures, but I carried the weight. Now you can carry it." He tried to shout, tried to accuse me of cruelty, but I cut him off. "Don't call me unless it's to tell me you've paid. These are your responsibilities now, not mine." And I ended the call. Hannah didn't scream at me after that. She didn't even speak. She walked through the house like a ghost, her silence thicker than her words. She glared, rolled her eyes, slammed her bedroom door, but she didn't ask me for help. She knew the answer. Amber, though, she couldn't stay quiet. One evening, when Lily and Ben were in their rooms, she cornered me in the kitchen. "You've gone too far," she hissed. "She's just a child. She doesn't understand what she said." I stared at her, my voice low and even. "She's 16, Amber. Old enough to drive. Old enough to choose her words. If she's old enough to tell me I'm not her father, then she's old enough to live without me paying like one." Amber's eyes filled with tears. "You're punishing her." "No," I said, turning away. "I'm respecting her boundary. She told me who I am not. I'm simply agreeing." The days dragged into weeks. Hannah's world shrank. No new clothes, no pocket money, no easy rides through the life I had built for her. She started skipping outings with friends, hiding in her room, her phone dark more often than lit. She called Paul constantly, at least she tried to. Sometimes he picked up, sometimes he didn't. I could hear the muffled arguments through her closed door, the frustration in her voice, the silence that followed. Once, she burst out of her room, tears streaking down her face. She ran past me, past Amber, out the front door into the night. Amber chased her, shouting her name, but I stayed seated on the couch. I didn't move, because I knew the truth. She wasn't running from me. She was running from the realization that her real dad couldn't or wouldn't save her. Amber begged me to reconsider. "Just her phone, at least," she pleaded. "Please, David, let her keep some dignity." But I shook my head. Her dignity doesn't come from me, comes from him. If he can't provide, then she needs to see that clearly. Shielding her only delays the lesson. The house grew colder. Conversations dwindled to whispers. Lily and Ben tiptoed around the silence, their laughter fading into caution. They asked fewer questions, kept to themselves. Even they sensed the fracture widening. And still I did not bend. Every bill, every responsibility, every cost was sent to Paul. He stopped answering my emails, stopped picking up my calls. But the invoices kept going, piling up in his mailbox, a paper mountain of neglect. I didn't care if he ignored them. What mattered was that they no longer landed on my shoulders. Amber accused me of cruelty. Hannah despised me with her silence. Paul cursed me over the phone. But for the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom. Because finally, the weight was no longer mine. It didn't take long for the silence to crack. At first, Hannah tried to maintain her mask of defiance, walking past me without a word, slamming doors, scoffing at Lily and Ben's laughter as though their loyalty to me was a betrayal of her. But behind the bravado, the walls of her life were crumbling, and there was no one left to hold them up. The phone went first, then the soccer team, then the school notices. Her social life began to rot from the edges inward. She could no longer post photos from expensive outings, no longer join friends at the mall without begging rides or money she didn't have. The girl who once wielded independence like a crown found herself stripped bare, dependent on the very man who had abandoned her and the man she had rejected. Paul, of course, failed her. He called me once more, his voice bitter with helplessness. "David, you've made your point. I can't handle this. You think I've got money lying around? I don't. You've been covering this stuff for years. Why stop now? I listened, my face blank, my voice cold. Because she told me I wasn't her father. I believed her. Now it's your turn. Handle it, Paul. Handle your own daughter. He cursed, shouted, then fell silent. I could hear the fear in his breathing. He had no plan, no resources, no sense of duty. He was a hollow man holding a title he couldn't afford. And for once, that title weighed on him instead of me. Amber tried to mediate. Her words grew softer, almost desperate. David, you're hurting her. She's just a kid. Kids say things they don't mean. But I knew better. Words like that aren't accidents. They are daggers sharpened over years of silence, aimed with precision. Hannah had chosen the blade. I simply refused to bleed anymore. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Hannah appeared in the kitchen one evening, no phone in her hand, no headphones around her neck. Her eyes were red, not with rage this time, but with something closer to defeat. She stood there for a long moment, her voice barely audible. "You've done more for me than my dad ever has," she whispered. Amber froze, her eyes darting to me as if expecting me to rush forward, to embrace the apology, to declare forgiveness. But I didn't move. I stayed seated, my hands folded on the table. "I'm glad you see that," I said quietly. "But from now on, respect comes first. If you want my help, you start by treating me with the respect I've earned. Otherwise, I'm done." Her lips trembled. She nodded slightly, then fled the room. Amber turned on me, her voice sharp. "She admitted it, David. She sees what you've done. Isn't that what you wanted?" I shook my head. "No. I wanted her to respect me before the collapse, not after. Regret is not respect. Desperation is not love." The next day, a message arrived from Paul. It wasn't angry this time. It was almost pathetic in its bewilderment. "How did you even manage to cover all this for so long?" he wrote. I stared at the screen, a bitter smile forming. He had finally glimpsed the truth, that I had carried the weight of 2 fathers while he posed for pictures. But I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. His shock wasn't worth my explanation. The household shifted after that. Hannah moved more quietly, less confrontational, as though she feared provoking another withdrawal. Amber watched me with conflicted eyes, torn between her daughter's pain and the brutal justice of my stance. Lily and Ben clung closer to me, sensing that the world inside our walls was unstable but knowing I was steady beneath it. There were tears. There were late-night arguments muffled behind closed doors. There were moments when Amber accused me of being heartless. "She's your family," she insisted. "You can't just cut her off like this." But I could, and I had, because the truth is simple. Family is not a title. It is not blood. It is not a word tossed out at dinner tables or written beneath smiling photographs. Family is built through sacrifice, through consistency, through respect. And Hannah had denied me that. Paul had abandoned it. Amber had excused it. So I set the boundary, sharp and final. From now on, my support would never again be automatic. It would never again flow in silence, taken for granted, erased with a single cruel sentence. If Hannah wanted help, it would be earned with respect, not demanded as entitlement. And to my surprise, she began to adjust. Slowly, uneasily. She said, "Thank you," when Amber asked me to drive her somewhere. She didn't roll her eyes when I reminded her of chores. She even joined Lily and Ben once for a board game, sitting stiffly at the table but present all the same. It wasn't love. It wasn't even reconciliation. It was survival. But it was a start. Still, I never forgot the silence at that dinner table. I never forgot the look in her eyes when she declared I was not her father. That wound remains, carved deep into me, reminding me that the line between duty and slavery is thin, and once crossed, almost impossible to return from. I don't know if Hannah will ever truly see me as her father. Maybe she will years from now, when Paul's absence weighs heavier than his presence ever did. Maybe she won't, but I no longer live on hope. I live on boundaries, and perhaps that is what saved me. Because in the end, the most priceless part wasn't Hannah's quiet acknowledgement. It wasn't her half-apology or her fragile attempts at change. It was Paul's bewildered message, his stunned realization that I had carried the weight he had abandoned. How did you even manage to cover all this? The answer is simple. I managed because I had to, because someone had to, but I don't have to anymore. So I ask you, whoever hears this, was I wrong to draw the line? Was I cruel to let the weight fall where it belonged? Or was this the only way to stop being the ghost who pays, the man erased in every way but his bank account? Tell me, what would you have done?